None of the idol-worshiping advisors had been able to tell the king his dream. Only Daniel's God could do that. Your God is the true God. Captured. The memory verse is from Psalm 119, verse 30. It says, "I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I have set my heart on your laws." The message is, I serve God when I help my friends make good choices. Imagine what it would be like if you suddenly had to leave your home, if you could not take anything with you. What if you had to leave your family? Daniel had to leave everything behind. It happened a long time ago. The people of Judah had forgotten about God again. Many chose to break God's laws and worship idols. But a few people still loved and worshiped the true God. Daniel's family was among them. When Daniel was born, his parents gave him a special name. They wanted to remind him always to be loyal to God. Daniel's name means God is my judge. His parents wanted him to know that it did not matter what people around him did or said. The only thing that really mattered was whether God would be happy with what Daniel did. As he grew up, Daniel decided to live for God. He put God first in everything he did. God came first in his everyday chores and in bigger things. Daniel wanted to be a servant of God, just as Samuel had been. Daniel lived in Jerusalem, the capital city of Judah. King Jehoiakim also lived in Jerusalem. The king did not worship God. He encouraged the people to worship idols. He built beautiful temples to these idols, and he led the Hebrew people in celebrating those idols' holidays. Daniel decided that no matter what happened, wicked King Jehoiakim could not force him to do wrong. Daniel was not alone. He also had 3 friends, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, who also wanted God to be first in their lives. After King Jehoiakim died, his son Jehoiachin became king. He also did not worship God. While Daniel and his friends were still young, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacked Jerusalem. He quickly defeated the Hebrew army and entered the city. His army captured King Jehoiachin and his family. They went into the temple Solomon had built and took away many golden treasures. As the soldiers went through the city, they took anything they wanted from people's homes. King Nebuchadnezzar took many prisoners back to Babylon. Among them were Daniel and his 3 friends. They were taken away from their families into a foreign land. Though torn away from home and family, they encouraged each other. Together they decided that when they arrived in Babylon, they would live for God. They would help each other make right choices. Upon arriving in Babylon, the 4 were given new names. Daniel became Belshazzar, Hananiah was named Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. These new names honored foreign idols, idols they would not worship. Daniel had lost his home and his family. He had even lost his name. What did he have left? Much. Nebuchadnezzar and all his armies could not take God away from Daniel. Daniel had chosen to serve and love God, and God was with Daniel no matter where he was. Daniel had everything he needed, a loving God and good friends to encourage him. God would remember Daniel and his 3 friends. He had a special work for them to do. God wanted Nebuchadnezzar to learn about him. These 4 Hebrews would lead the way. They would teach the king about the God of heaven. Healthy choices. The memory verse is from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. It says, "So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." The message is, I serve God when I choose to be healthy. Imagine you are very hungry and you are invited to a banquet. You sit down at the table and you find wine and unclean foods that you know you shouldn't have. What will you do? Daniel and his 3 friends faced that problem. Let's see what they did. King Nebuchadnezzar's army had invaded and conquered Judah. All the young men from the royal family and other important families had been taken to Babylon. Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael were among the young Hebrews. Nebuchadnezzar's empire was enormous. The king knew that the Hebrew captives had many abilities, so he decided to train some of them for work in his government. They could help rule some parts of his vast empire. But first, they had to learn Babylonian ways. They needed to learn the language. They had to learn the way things were done in Babylon. Daniel and his 3 friends knew that they were going to serve the king, but they decided that God would be first in their lives. They would serve him first no matter what happened. There were so many new and interesting things to see in Babylon. Great temples for worshiping idols were everywhere. The young Hebrews saw parks shaded by strange trees and hanging flowering plants. The cities of Babylon were truly beautiful. After their long journey, everyone looked forward to their first meal in Babylon. They were to eat the best food. It was the same food served at the king's table. Rich roasted meats and sweet wine were on every table. The sweetest desserts in the whole land were there for all. All of the Hebrews were delighted with the food, all except Daniel and his 3 friends. They could not eat it. They knew that this food was not good for them. They also knew that some of the food and wine had been offered to idols. Daniel and his 3 friends determined to serve God no matter what happened. So Daniel asked the officer in charge of all the Hebrews to help. He asked for simple food and water to drink. Although the king's officer respected Daniel, he refused. He was afraid for his life. King Nebuchadnezzar himself had ordered the meal. If Daniel and his friends didn't eat that food, they might not be as strong as the others. And if that happened, the king might have the officer killed. But Daniel did not give up. The officer had appointed Melzar, a steward, to watch over Daniel and his friends. Daniel appealed to Melzar. "Test us," he said. "Let us eat simple food and drink only water for 10 days. If we are not as healthy as the others, do with us as you will." The steward agreed. At the end of 10 days, the 4 Hebrews were stronger and more alert than the other captives. With God's help, they had passed the test. During all 3 years of their training, they were served simple food and water. God was pleased with Daniel and his friends. The Bible says God helped them with their studies. He gave them wisdom and understanding, and he gave Daniel the ability to understand dreams. Daniel served God first. He obeyed God's rules about eating and drinking, and God rewarded Daniel. Daniel's service to Nebuchadnezzar would lead that great ruler to know the true God. When we put God first, He can use us to show others the great things He can do. Forgotten dream. The memory verse is from Daniel chapter 2, verse 23. It says, God, you have given me wisdom and power. The message is, I serve God when I help people in need. Have you ever awakened in the morning knowing that you had a dream, but were unable to remember it? Or maybe you could remember it, but it seemed very silly. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that he could not remember. It happened like this. God blessed Daniel and his friends. He gave them wisdom to understand the hardest assignments. The king himself tested them at the end of their 3 years of training. He was pleased. They were 10 times better in everything than all the wise men in the kingdom. King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians worshipped idols. They made idols of wood and stone, and they believed that their dreams were messages from their idols. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. When he awoke the next morning, he was very disturbed. He knew he had dreamed about something important, but he was even more upset because he could not remember the dream. The king called his wisest advisors and interpreters before him. I had a dream last night, he said. Tell me what it means. But we don't know what you dreamed, they replied. Tell us your dream, then we can tell you what it means. Otherwise, how could we interpret it? The king became very angry. If you were really the wisest men in Babylon, you would know what I dreamed, he said. Twice the wise men asked about the dream, but the king could not remember. He became so angry that he ordered that all the wise men in the empire were to be killed. Daniel and his friends were not among the men who had been called before the king, but they were among those who would be killed. When they heard about it, Daniel talked to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. Daniel asked Arioch to explain what was wrong. Then Daniel went before the king. He asked Nebuchadnezzar for time to discover the dream and what it meant. Daniel and his friends spent that night in prayer. As they prayed, God gave Daniel a vision. He showed Daniel the king's dream and told Daniel the meaning. The next morning, Daniel hurried to Nebuchadnezzar's palace. He told the king exactly what he had seen. A huge statue with a head of gold, a chest of silver, thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. A rock from heaven fell and crushed the feet. The whole statue fell over and was destroyed. Then Daniel explained the meaning to Nebuchadnezzar. The dream had predicted the future. King Nebuchadnezzar was a strong king, but someday his kingdom would fall from power. The king of another country would take over. Later, still another kingdom would take over. Each kingdom that came into power would be weaker. Finally, God would set up his kingdom, a kingdom that would never end. None of the idol-worshipping advisors had been able to tell the king his dream. Only Daniel's God could do that. Your God is the true God, Nebuchadnezzar told Daniel. Finally, the king made Daniel governor over Babylon. In this position, Daniel could help others know about the God of heaven. Of all the wise men of Babylon, only Daniel and his friends had asked God for help. God heard them, and he told them everything they needed to know. God will hear you too. When you need answers to difficult questions, he is always ready to help you. Put out to pasture. Today's memory verse is from Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, "Let your speech always be with grace, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. The message is, I can serve God wherever I am. Would you like to live in a field with cows and eat grass? A king once spent 7 years living among the animals. This is how it happened. King Nebuchadnezzar was bothered by the dream of the great image. He was flattered and pleased that Babylon was first, but it worried him that other kingdoms came after his kingdom. Then he had another strange dream. Nebuchadnezzar's wise men could not interpret the dream. So once again, Nebuchadnezzar sent for Daniel. He told Daniel about his dream. This is what he told Daniel. I dreamed a large tree in the middle of a plain. It was enormous, and it seemed to reach up to heaven. The leaves were beautiful, and the fruit plentiful. The birds made their home in its branches, and the animals sheltered under it. Then suddenly I saw a holy one. I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Cut down the tree, trim off the branches, tell the animals to run away and the birds to find another home. But leave the stump in the field and put a brass and iron band around it. Then the voice continued, Let him be drenched with dew. Let him live with the animals. Let his mind be like an animal until 7 times pass. I have made this decision so that the living may know that God is the ruler of all the kingdoms, and he gives them to whom he wants to. When Daniel heard the dream, he was troubled. The meaning was plain to him, and it was not a pleasant message to deliver to the king. The king might become angry, but Nebuchadnezzar tried to reassure him. He just wanted to know what the dream meant. Daniel knew that God wanted him to speak the truth, so he told the king that his dream was a warning from God. He explained that Nebuchadnezzar was the tree. He had become great, strong, and powerful. He ruled over many places. However, God saw his pride. If Nebuchadnezzar did not acknowledge him as Lord, something strange and terrible would happen. He would become insane and live in the fields like an animal for 7 years. At the end of that time, he would become king again. Daniel encouraged Nebuchadnezzar to turn away from his sins and his pride. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar he should do what was right. He urged the king to be kind to those in need. Then maybe this vision wouldn't happen. A year later, Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the roof of the royal palace. He looked at all the wonderful things around him. He swelled with pride and smiled to himself. Is this not great Babylon that I have built by my power and for the glory of my majesty? No sooner had he said these words than he heard a voice from heaven. Nebuchadnezzar, you will become like an animal. You will live out in the fields for 7 years. At the end of that time, you will acknowledge me as Lord. Then you will become king again. It was just as God had said. He lived outside in the field like an animal for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar became sane again. He praised God as the ruler of the earth. His advisors and nobles came to talk with him, and he was made king once more. It was hard for Daniel to deliver God's message to Nebuchadnezzar, but God was with him. And God will be with you as you serve him wherever you are. Handwriting on the wall. Today's memory verse is from Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 7. It says, But the Lord said to me, Do not say, I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. The message is, I serve God when I help others understand His Word. Have you ever seen words scribbled on a wall? It does not look very nice. How would you feel if you saw writing appear on a wall, but could not see who was writing it or understand what was being written? That is just what happened at a king's party. There's going to be a party at the palace. Word spread rapidly through the city. Belshazzar, King Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, was the present-day king of Babylon. He had chosen a day to honor the idols of Babylon with a huge festival. Everyone was ready for a party. For months, Cyrus's army had been winning battles against the Babylonian army. People were worried because the Persian general was camped very near the city of Babylon. Everyone wanted to enjoy themselves and forget about the fighting. Belshazzar's party began in the morning and lasted all day. He probably had dancers and storytellers to entertain his guests. This party was supposed to honor the idols of Babylon, but most people were busy pleasing themselves with wine, food, and entertainment. Belshazzar did not want to follow God. He wanted to do what he wanted. He did not honor God. He was not humble. This must have made God sad. God would have been happy if Belshazzar had changed, but Belshazzar wanted his own way. As Belshazzar grew more and more drunk, his wickedness became greater. He called for the sacred vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. He and his guests filled them with wine and made offerings to their gods. Can you imagine that? Those vessels were once used for worship in God's temple. They were dedicated to God. Now they were filled with wine and used to worship idols. Suddenly, there was a stir. Along one wall of the palace, a mysterious hand began to write. A hand that wasn't connected to a body. Belshazzar stared with horror. This frightened him. The Bible says his legs became weak and his knees were knocking. What did it mean? He had to find out. He called for his magicians and astrologers. He called for the priest who served the idols Belshazzar had honored. If anyone can tell me what these words mean, I will give him a gold chain, and I will make him the third highest ruler in Babylon, he said. But none of the wise men could interpret the words. Belshazzar trembled. He became even more afraid. Finally, his mother remembered Daniel. "Send for Daniel," she said. "He interpreted your grandfather Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Maybe he can help now." So Daniel was brought before the king and shown the mysterious writing. Daniel's words were respectful as he told the king the bad news. "You have been too proud," he told Belshazzar. "You insulted God, so he sent this message to you." Daniel then read the message, "Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin." Daniel interpreted the message. Mene means that God will soon end your reign. Tekel means that God has judged you and found you guilty of horrible sins. Upharsin means that the Persians will conquer Babylon. Even as Belshazzar put a gold chain around Daniel's neck and promoted him to third highest in Babylon, God's words came true. The Persian army, commanded by Cyrus, sneaked into the city and conquered it. Belshazzar died that night. Sometimes serving God doesn't make people happy with us. God will make us strong enough to take His message to anyone who needs to hear it. Will you be God's messenger and tell others about Him? First place. The message is I worship God when I give Him first place in my life. Today's memory verse is from Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. It says, 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God. What choices did you make this morning? Did you decide what to wear or what to eat? What about the choices regarding how you spoke to your parents or brothers and sisters? What other choices did you make? Each day is filled with choices. Each day we decide in many different ways whether to put God first. When we worship God, we're really saying, Lord, I love you. There are many different ways to do that. Daniel knew how to worship God. He knew that he wanted to put God first every minute of every day. It was like clockwork, morning, noon, and night. Daniel opened his upstairs window. He turned toward Jerusalem. Then he knelt and prayed. It didn't matter who saw him. It didn't matter if there were other things that needed to be done. Daniel always prayed at those times, and often in between. Always. God was his very best friend. Daniel made sure that his time with God was the most important time of the day. People who liked Daniel knew about his special prayer time. People who didn't like him knew about his special prayer time too. When King Darius became ruler of Babylon, he decided to have some men be in charge of small parts of it. So he appointed 120 governors. Then he put 3 presidents over those governors. Daniel was one of those presidents. Before long, King Darius even planned to put Daniel in charge of the other presidents because he did his work so well. This plan made the other 2 presidents and the governors jealous. Very jealous. So jealous, in fact, that they searched for something, anything, to complain to the king about Daniel. "I can't believe this man," one of the governors complained. "He's loyal, he's faithful, he's honest. There's nothing we can complain about. I can't stand him." "Look, there he is at his prayer time, right now," grumbled another. "Ah, my friends, that may be just what we're looking for. I think I have a plan." The 3rd governor quickly described his plot to the others. The rulers hurried to speak to King Darius. "O great and powerful king," they began. "We have a plan to honor you. We want to make a new law. A law that says no one may pray to anyone but you for the next 30 days. The king liked the sound of that. He thought an important king such as himself should be worshipped. He thought about it for a moment and then asked, "What if someone doesn't keep this law?" His advisors pretended to think, though they already knew the treatment they wanted for Daniel. "How about throwing them to the lions?" The king was surprised, but finally decided to agree to the plan. So the law was passed, and of course Daniel knew about it. He also understood the reason those men had asked for the law. But no law made by man could change Daniel's love for God. No law could change his habit of worshiping him. He continued to pray 3 times a day. How about you? Really worshiping God means putting God first in your life. Daniel was determined to keep worshiping God no matter what happened. Will you choose to worship God by giving Him first place in everything today? Will you decide that nothing will keep you from worshiping God?
This podcast is read by Franita Buddy for Gracelink.net. Created and produced by Falvo Fowler. Post-produced by Faith Toe at Studio El Piso. The theme music is by Clayton Kinney. Animation and artwork by Diogo Godoy. The audio engineer was Karel Holness. For more information, please visit gracelink.net.